Hello dear students, welcome to the endocrinology series wherein we have studied about hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid and parathyroid gland. Myself Dr. Amrita Bakshi from University of Delhi, and I would be today dealing with the next gland, that is the adrenal gland. Adrenal gland is a paired gland which is located above the kidneys, hence it is also called as suprarenal gland. You can see, as shown in the figure, the shape of adrenal gland is flattened. It is pyramidal in shape with dimensions of about 3 to 5 centimeter height, 2 to 3 centimeter width and around 1 centimeter thick in the adult humans. It weighs around 3.5 to 5 grams. Functionally and structurally, adrenal gland is divided into different zones. The outermost covering is that of a connective tissue which covers this gland and is called as the capsule. Below the capsule lies the outer region, the peripheral region, which constitutes about 80 to 90% of the gland and is called as adrenal cortex. And inside adrenal cortex lies a small region referred to as adrenal medulla. The adrenal cortex portion consists of lipid containing steroidogenic cells which are referred to as adrenocortical cells, while the cells present in adrenal medulla are referred to as chromaffin cells. Now you must be wondering why they are named so. So chroma, as the name itself suggests, that it indicates color. So these cells have affinity for the chromium salts which are used for staining purpose, that impart them a specific color. So if we look at the origin, you will find out that interestingly the adrenal cortex and medullary portion have arisen from different germ layers. The mesoderm has given rise to the adrenal cortex cells, while the medullary cells have been originated from neural crest cells. So when the pregnancy is about 6 to 7 gestation weeks, you will see that there are certain chromaffin cells. There are certain cells which are referred to as fetal cortex cells. These are the cells which will give rise to the cortex portion. But you will see that as the gestation weeks keeps on continuing, you will find out that a particular zonation has been derived in the adrenal gland. So you can see here that there is the capsule, then there is a definite zone formed by the cells, then there are cortex cells, cortical cells referred to as again the fetal zone, and in the center there are these medullary cells. Now what is important here is that as the adult adrenal gland is formed, a complete zonation is achieved about 3 to 4 years after the birth, wherein the outermost layer is of capsule followed by cortex and the medulla. But what is important here is that during the fetal period, there was referred to as a fetal cortex zone or fetal zone. Now it is worthy to mention that during the birth, this zone occupies bulk of the adrenal gland and it is present in mammalian fetus like monkeys, armadillos, sloths, elephant seal, pig and the members of cat family. Interestingly, this zone rapidly degenerates after the birth. So you must be thinking, then what is the function of this zone during the gestation period? So you are aware that during pregnancy there is a significant role played by estradiol hormone, and this hormone is derived from the placenta. Now in one of the lectures I would be discussing about the biosynthesis of estradiol, but for now you must know that this hormone is derived from the androgens. So during gestation period, this fetal zone helps in the synthesis of large amounts of DHEA sulfate, which is dihydroepiandrosterone sulfate. So this is very important androgen which serves as a precursor for estradiol hormone, and hence the pregnancy is maintained. Worthy to mention that if there is any issue with the production of this precursor DHEA sulfate, under that scenario the abortion takes place. So we can see that in adult there is a capsule, then a cortex and a medulla region. Now let us delve a deeper. In the adrenal cortex, there are further 3 zones referred to as zona glomerulosa coming from the outside to the inner region. Zona glomerulosa, then zona fasciculata, and then zona reticularis. Now the arrangement of the cells is different in all the 3 zones. Let's have a look at this. So the capsule, as I have already told, is made up of the connective tissue. Then comes the zona glomerulosa. Now here the cells are very closely packed, and you can also see, zoom it a bit, and you can see that these cells are arranged in specific clusters. These cells are the one which produces the mineralocorticoids, that is the aldosterone. Below the zona glomerulosa lies the widest zone of adrenal cortex, and that is referred to as zona fasciculata. Here you can see that the cells are arranged in the long straight columns, and these cells are responsible for the production of glucocorticoids, which in case of humans is cortisol. Below zona fasciculata lies zona reticularis, wherein the cells are arranged in the branching cords, as you can see here. So these cells are responsible for the production of androgens. So this is the adrenal cortex region. Now below this lies adrenal medulla, which contains the chromaffin cells that produces your stress hormones, that is epinephrine and norepinephrine. Worthy to mention here is that these cells, chromaffin cells, are also referred to as modified postganglionic neurons of sympathetic system. Now why so? So you must remember that both the postganglionic neurons of sympathetic system as well as the chromaffin cells have certain common features. Number one, that they have same origin, that is from the neural crest cells. Both of these cells are adrenergic, that is they release adrenaline and noradrenaline. And the third thing is that they both are innervated by sympathetic preganglionic neurons of autonomic nervous system, which has been shown here. So this is your parasympathetic nervous system and this is the sympathetic nervous system, wherein the preganglionic neurons are cholinergic in nature, that is they will produce the acetylcholine. But the postganglionic neurons of parasympathetic nervous system is cholinergic, while that of the sympathetic nervous system is adrenergic. Hence, now I hope you can understand that why chromaffin cells are called as modified postganglionic neurons, these postganglionic neurons of the sympathetic nervous system. So now, the next question arises that we have seen there is a different origin of adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla. Then you must be wondering then why they are a composite gland in mammals. So there is a reason behind it. The close association between adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla holds a functional significance. So you can see here that the conversion of norepinephrine to epinephrine requires just the addition of a methyl group. Rest of the structure is same. So the production of both the hormones takes place in the chromaffin cells of adrenal medulla, but this conversion from norepinephrine to epinephrine requires an enzyme called as PNMT, which is phenylethynolamine N-methyl transferase. Now what is important here is that the activity of this enzyme is dependent upon the hormone, that is glucocorticoids, which are synthesized from the adrenal cortex. So this makes this thing very clear that the close anatomical coupling and functional interrelationship between cortex and medulla implies that these tissues, though of different origin, may constitute an integrated functional unit in higher vertebrates. So now we are at a state wherein we can understand the function of these hormones. So let us start from the outermost region, that is the zona glomerulosa. So the cells of this region synthesize mineralocorticoids. The major mineralocorticoid in mammals is aldosterone, which from its name suggests that it regulates mineral balance in our body. So it is responsible for the regulation of sodium and potassium balance in the body, and thereby it regulates our blood pressure and blood volume. Besides, it promotes hydrogen ion excretion in the urine, and by doing this it prevents acidosis, that means blood pH less than 7.35. So it prevents this acidosis. How does this regulation of aldosterone secretion occurs? So there is a study wherein it was observed that hypophycectomy was done in the experimental subjects. So there was removal of this pituitary gland. Interestingly, the observation was that the glucocorticoids level were decreased, but there was marginal decrease in the levels of mineralocorticoid. So what does this suggest? It suggests that there is no control of pituitary gland in the secretion of aldosterone. Then what is it that regulates secretion? So the very important system is renin-aldosterone angiotensin system, which is also referred to as RAS system, which regulates the secretion of aldosterone. Before understanding this RAS system, you need to understand a few terms, for example, the macula densa and juxtaglomerular cells. So what are these macula densa cells? For this, just have a look at this figure. So you remember the structure of a nephron. So there is this Bowman's capsule, and then there comes the descending loop of Henle's, then comes the ascending loop of Henle's, right? So the final part of the ascending loop which comes up, the ascending loop of the nephron, that will make contact with the efferent arteriole, which will be serving that renal corpuscle in each nephron. So there is a very close association between the cells of the ascending limb of nephron with that of the efferent arteriole. So here the columnar tubular cells become very crowded, and these are thus referred to as macula densa cells. Now along the macula densa cells, there are certain cells which become modified in the walls of efferent arteriole. So they become modified smooth muscle fibers and are referred to as juxtaglomerular cells. Juxta meaning closer to the glomerular region. So together these MD cells and JG cells are referred to as juxtaglomerular apparatus, which is located here, just above the Bowman's capsule in each nephron. Now whenever there is any kind of disbalance in the blood pressure and blood volume because of several reasons, for example dehydration, sodium ion deficiency, or any kind of blood loss, this will definitely lead to decrease in the blood volume, which will in turn decrease the blood pressure. This decrease in blood pressure will be detected by the modified smooth muscle cells, that is the juxtaglomerular cells. Now these cells, when they will receive this signal, will release an enzyme called as renin. This renin enzyme will quickly enter into the circulation. Why I am using term quickly? Because the half-life of renin is very less. So it will quickly enter into the circulation, and then it will act on its substrate, which is angiotensinogen released from the liver, and converts it into angiotensin 1, which will again enter into the circulation and will get converted into angiotensin 2 by the action of an enzyme called as angiotensin convertase enzyme, which is present in the lungs. So now this angiotensin 2 will perform the physiological actions. It will go and do the vasoconstriction of the arterioles because it is a potent vasoconstrictor. So now you can imagine if the arterioles have become constricted, definitely the blood pressure will increase. Now the purpose was to increase the blood pressure because there was decrease in the blood pressure. So now the homeostasis is being achieved with the help of constriction. Now the second target of angiotensin 2 would be the adrenal cortex. the cells of the adrenal cortex will release the aldosterone, that is the mineralocorticoid. And now this aldosterone will go and act on the cells in the kidney, wherein there will be increased sodium ion absorption. So, it will thereafter leads to water retention, and when there is retention of water, what will happen? Again there will be increase in the blood volume, and therefore the blood pressure will be maintained. Besides the RAS system, the potassium ions also regulate the secretion of aldosterone, as you can see here. So, potassium ions will also help in indicating the cortical cells to produce the aldosterone. Coming on to the next region, which is the zona fasciculata, which secretes glucocorticoids. The primary glucocorticoid is cortisol in humans. The less abundant forms are corticosterone, cortisol. What is the function of glucocorticoids? You can understand from the name itself that it will regulate the glucose metabolism. So, what it does, it actually goes and increases the specific enzymes involved in gluconeogenesis. So, it goes and acts on the liver cells and stimulate the expression of PepsiK, which is phosphoenol pyruvate carboxykinase, and will convert amino acids or lactic acids to glucose, and these glucose will be used up by neurons and other cells for the ATP production. The other roles of glucocorticoids are in protein metabolism. It will increase the rate of protein breakdown in muscle fibers, which in turn will increase amino acids, which will be used up by the cells for the production of ATP. Likewise, in lipid metabolism, it increases lipolysis, wherein breakdown of triglycerides and release of fatty acids takes place from the adipose tissue into the blood. It also helps in dealing with chronic stresses, including exercise, fasting, fright, temperature extremes, high altitudes, bleeding, infection, surgery, traumas and disease, combat by additional glucose, by providing additional glucose by the liver cells. It also helps in depressing the immune system, immune responses. So, if you could recall, during COVID time, these steroids were given. So, these were these glucocorticoids only, which were given to suppress the immune system, and therefore these are also prescribed for organ transplant recipients for retarding the tissue rejection by the immune system. And lastly, the anti-inflammatory effects. They also inhibit WBCs that participate in inflammatory responses. They retard tissue repair and slows wound healing. They are useful in treatment of chronic inflammatory disorders like rheumatoid arthritis. The secretion of glucocorticoids is via pituitary. So, any stimulus which will lead to the decrease in glucocorticoid level will stimulate the hypothalamic neurons to produce the corticotropin releasing hormone, which in turn will go and act on the corticotrophs of the anterior pituitary, and they will produce the ACTH. This ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, will go and stimulate the zona fasciculata in the adrenal cortex to produce the glucocorticoids. Coming on to the last part of the adrenal cortex, that is the zona reticularis. So, it produces small amounts of weak androgens in both the sexes, that is dehydroepiandrosterone, which is the major androgen, and it stimulates the axillary and pubic hair growth in boys and girls. Now, in case of males, what has been observed that after puberty, testosterone is majorly released by the testes, and therefore the actions or the role of DHEA becomes insignificant. But in case of females, the role of DHEA holds significance because it promotes libido, that is the sex drive, and it also helps to get converted into the estrogens in other parts of the body. Important to note is that after menopause, estrogen primarily comes from the adrenal androgens, because the ovaries, they basically atrophies. After understanding the cortex, now we will talk about the adrenal medulla. Now, since you can understand that these were derived from the neural crest cells and they were under the direct control of autonomic nervous system, the secretion of the hormones from the adrenal medulla is very quick. So they intensify sympathetic responses which occurs in other parts of the body with the help of two major hormones, out of which 80% is epinephrine, adrenaline, and 20% is norepinephrine, noradrenaline. Now the secretion of epinephrine and norepinephrine is regulated by the stress, the certain stimulus, and generally the stress, if acute, stimulates the epinephrine or norepinephrine, and this will send the impulse, this will generate the impulse from the hypothalamus and stimulate the sympathetic preganglionic neurons, which in turn will stimulate these chromaffin cells to secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine, which will help in fight and flight response by increasing heart rate, by increasing force of contraction to increase the heart output, which in turn will increase the blood pressure, and therefore once the blood pressure is increased, more amount of blood will reach to the important organs including heart, liver, skeletal muscles and adipose tissue. It will dilate the airways to the lungs and increase the blood levels of glucose and fatty acids. So we can understand that the role of epinephrine and norepinephrine is important in stress. But you must be wondering that even the glucocorticoids played a significant role in dealing with stress. Then how these two hormones are different at the level of function? So let me tell you, whenever there is some chronic stress, for example surgery, under that scenario, the glucocorticoids plays a significant role. So these glucocorticoids released from the cortical cells of the adrenal gland will help in the production or release or increase in the levels of blood sugar by acting by increasing the enzymes of gluconeogenesis. But under the acute stress, for example, I am talking to you, but suddenly this wall collapses. If this wall collapses, or suddenly if a dog barks in my ears, this is what is called as the acute stress. Also, if you all must have felt, if you look below from the very tall or high-rise buildings, there is a rush of blood in your body. That is the acute stress, and that is because of the quick action of epinephrine and norepinephrine. So since they are under the control of nervous system, they quickly increases our heart rate and therefore increases our blood pressure. So in today's lecture, what did you understand? So we understood that adrenal gland is a composite gland. Although the two regions, that is adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla, they were derived from two different germ layers. Mesoderm gave rise to the cortical cells, while the neural crest cells give rise to the medullary cells. But they being composite holds a functional significance because the conversion of norepinephrine to epinephrine by the action of an enzyme PNMT is under the control of a hormone produced by the adrenal cortex, that is glucocorticoids. Hence, it is a composite gland in case of mammals. The second thing which you understood in today's lecture is that a number of hormones are produced from the adrenal gland. We saw that the outermost zone of the cortex, that is zona glomerulosa, that produced mineralocorticoids, that is aldosterone. Then there is zona fasciculata, that produced glucocorticoids, that is cortisol. Then comes zona reticularis, which produces androgens. And then comes the adrenal medulla, which again in turn is producing the epinephrine and norepinephrine. So if we see that all these hormones produced by the adrenal gland are majorly helping in regulating the metabolism under stress conditions, whether acute or chronic. But other than stress, we cannot forget the role of androgens produced from the reticularis. So these androgens, we have learnt that they play a significant role in females, because in males after puberty, testes will in any way take care of the androgen production. So in case of females, the androgens are primarily derived from the adrenal cortical reticularis region. Other than this, what we have learned in today's lecture is about the fetal zone. During the fetal period, the bulk of the adrenal gland is occupied by the fetal cortex, which produces androgen, specifically DHEA sulfate. So this DHEA sulfate was acting as a precursor for estradiol, and this estradiol plays a significant role in the maintenance of pregnancy. So this is what you have learnt in today's lecture, and it is worthy to mention that adrenal gland is one of the most important gland in our body. Thank you.